The traditional answer has then to retain the basic presupposition, but to do our best to redeem the time. Our traditional forms of spirituality have been adapted from the monasteries for the millions. The assumption is that the heart of prayer is withdrawal. Obviously, not everyone has the time in a busy life for much withdrawal, nor has everyone the proficiency for it. Therefore, it is right that there should be special men and women whose life and ministry this is. These are the religious, whose pattern of spirituality provides the norm. This pattern is found in its purest form in the contemplative orders, but it can be adapted to different degrees of life in the world for the other religious communities, the secular clergy, and finally, by much dilution, for the laity. By this stage, the gaps may have shrunk considerably, but even the laymen can be exalted and expected to set aside regular spaces for prayer and to make an annual retreat. The last thing I want to do is to caricature this approach or to deny its profound value for those who can benefit from it. Nor, as will appear, do I wish in any way to doubt the virtue, and indeed the absolute necessity for withdrawal, disengagement, standing back. Nor, of course, should I be so foolish as to dispute the need in this field, as in every other, for experts, and it will become painfully obvious that I am not one. Nevertheless, I believe that some things need to be said on behalf of those who are not experts and who suffer for lack of a spokesman. And I speak with some feeling, for I believe the experts have induced in us a deep inferiority complex. They tell us that this is the way we ought to pray, and yet we find that we cannot maintain ourselves for any length of time, even on the lowest rungs of the ladder, let alone climb it. This is the scala sacra. If this is the scala sacra, then it seems it is not for us. We are evidently not the praying type, and so we carry on with an unacknowledged sense of failure and guilt. I'm sorry to say this, but my mouth is getting worn out and dried up, so could you please take over from here? Well, sure. I can testify to this most strongly from the time I spent in a theological college, both as a student and as a teacher. I certainly can. Here was a laboratory for prayer, indeed a laboratory for prayer. Here one ought to be able to pray if ever one could. It's a religious school, so of course you would be expected to pray. For here were all the conditions laid on: time, space, and quiet. Sounds like something I need myself, indeed. And here were the teachers, the classics of the spiritual life, and all the aids and manuals. If one failed in these circumstances, what hope was there later on, when one was surrounded and sucked down by the world? And yet I believe I am not alone in finding a theological college the most difficult rather than the easiest of places in which to pray. They can put a lot of pressure on you, I can speak from experience. For I discovered, and yet I believe I am not alone in finding a theological college the most difficult rather than the easiest. In fact, I know I am not, for I discovered there what I can only describe as a Freemasonry of silent, profoundly discouraged underground opposition, which felt that all that was said and written about prayer was doubtless unexceptionable, but simply did not speak to our condition. It was a real, now it's time to turn the page. Relief, finding kindred spirits, and slowly coming to the conviction from shared confession that we might not after all, as the evidence suggested, represent merely an unclubbable remnant for whom not even the outer rooms seemed designed to cater. Okay, I think I'm ready to start reading again. But nothing else was offered in its place, and to this day we have an inferiority complex. We dare not admit to others or to ourselves what non-starters we are. And yet I am persuaded that we have got something. And though, like the people of Chesterton's tone, we have not spoken yet, nevertheless our hour may be at hand. For one can detect a groundswell of dissatisfaction, and a murmuring for something more relevant in the way of what is styled a lay spirituality. But though we can all understand what is meant by such a phrase, I question whether it puts the distinction in the right place, on the assumption that lay here means non-ordained. Though there may be a difference of kind between the spirituality appropriate to the religious, in the technical sense, and to the Christian set in the world, whether as a priest or as a layman, I am not convinced that there is more than a difference of degree between the secular spirituality which is appropriate to the clergy and to the laity. I believe the yearning which is felt for something more earthed reflects a more general discontent with the traditional types of spirituality that we clergy cover up, the uncomfortable knowledge that they have long been failing us, and that we have failed to communicate a relevant spirituality to our people. By saying that what we need is something new for the laity. The only writing on prayer I know which has the courage to ask whether we do not need an entirely new starting point is the chapter in George MacLeod's prophetic book, Only One Way Left. It is significant that this is entitled The Prayer Life of a Christian Minister in a Committed Church. It is not only for laymen, it is for the laos, but for the laos in the mid-20th century. Dr. MacLeod makes something of the same point as Bonhoeffer when he says that our greatest difficulty is our difference from medieval man, when so many of our aids to prayer stem from a medieval pattern. And he goes on, your turn, I have what I call bankrupt corner in my library, and I am, if negatively, encouraged to discover it on the manse shelves of most ministers who have tried to pray. It is a platoon of Batam booklets enlisted at intervals to help one to pray better, purchased as each severely went dead on us, on the principle that hope springs eternal. Why do they go dead on us? Because most of them are written in terms of a different consciousness. Because most of them are conceived in medieval terms. We are not really conditioned to read what they are really saying. For medieval man, life was dull, brutish, and short. Life here was over against the real life of the spirit. We moderns are of a different expectancy to medieval man. Life is not brutish or short. We are girt about with possibilities. If medieval man looked up through a telescope, we rather look down through a microscope. Matter is so marvelous. If his fears were ghosts in the heavenlies, ours are in the infinitesimal but infernal and paradoxically infinite possibilities of hydrogen. Modern man is earthed, materially environed. His devotions are transmuted. There is no advance in all this. We are enmeshed in this materialism, but the secret of our exit is of vast importance. To be continued. Didn't have to say that. I knew. I just felt like saying it.